I've lived in New Orleans for 12 years and 2 more on the North Shore. I moved here from Oklahoma, and I came here to cover New Orleans public schools for the Times-Picayune. So my role started as an outside observer, trying to write about education, how we do it, what we do, what makes schools good, what makes them not good, responding to school testing, and being a piece of that conversation. I left journalism right before Hurricane Katrina, and then since then I've been doing work more directly related to community and parent engagement, so specifically trying to help parents understand what is happening with schools, how to navigate, how to enroll, how to advocate, doing some organizing with parents for a time period after Katrina, and then I also served a role in helping start a school and leading that school's board for a period of time. So I've had a lot of roles. So we dismantled the traditional public school district and replaced it with a network of charter schools that are sort of loosely connected to each other that exist in 2 sort of large buckets of districts. We have dramatically changed the teaching staff. I think that's a point of great contention, but we once had a primarily African American, primarily significantly experienced school teacher staff and community, and I think now we have a more half white, half black, and much younger teaching staff, so I think that's a big piece of what has changed. I think that we also have created a world in which I think that we've completely eliminated the way that children are assigned to schools, so I think those 3 are the big changes. So we now have charter schools, so they're managed by nonprofits and sort of privately operated schools. We now have very different teaching force, and we now have school choice, meaning that parents have the opportunity to send their kids to any school, regardless of where they live, but also the responsibility of figuring that out and getting their kids into a school, and no kind of like safety net backup district school anymore. I think that I don't think any of those 3 changes would have happened in it's the size, it's the level of change that I think would not have happened. I think we might have continued to create more charter schools regardless of the storm. We had some folks were talking about that. There was an increased desire to explore that space. So I think we would have perhaps created some more. There was some school choice, so parents did have some opportunities to choose schools outside of where they lived, and many people were using their own kind of school choice, meaning saying a different address and doing those kinds of things. So there was some school choosing happening, and also obviously folks who have money, those who are affluent, the middle class and mostly white community of New Orleans was definitely using school choice in the terms of the dollars that they paid to go to private schools. So those things were true, but they weren't at the capacity. Like we put that all on steroids in the years after Katrina. I think the teaching community, I think the changes to the teaching community probably would have been much slower. I think it was still happening. I think we were recruiting younger and younger teachers. I think the dismantling of traditional teacher education preparation programs is a national trend, and I think that we would have had that here, but perhaps everything would have been slower. There are a lot of folks who are running schools and leading in schools that were running and leading in schools before Katrina. I think it's really easy to miss that, and I think that that's part of the narrative that whether folks are critical of our current landscape or supportive of it, we tend to talk about it as if there's this hard stop between 2005 and now, like there was a hard stop between who is running schools, and that's not true. In my experience, a lot of the faces that I see in leading schools are in fact Black educators from New Orleans who were doing this work before and are still doing this. And I think that that's really important. So whatever we critique, know that some of that is, led by folks from New Orleans who have been doing this for a long time and been working with children for a long time. And whatever we celebrate, know that what we have gained is partly, significantly the responsibility of those predominantly women, but like educators who have been doing this work for a long time. And I think that that's really easy to miss. So I think one of the things that I hoped and think that we did do to some degree. I think that the moment of Hurricane Katrina was a moment for folks to pause in a great moment of crisis and grief, but to think about what might be possible. And so that was, out of everything that was hard, out of all of the worst things about Katrina and the abandonment of our city and the destruction and devastation and the way it revealed class and race oppression, there was that little glimmer of hope that we could use this opportunity to create something radically different. And I think that we have perhaps reached a plateau of thinking that creatively, and I would like to see us say, we created what we have now, we can create something totally different, and we need to take the space and the time to reflect and do that with integrity, with students at the center of that, with families at the center of that, and know that we don't just have to tinker around the edges, that we could say, we want something really different for our families and for our community. How do we make that happen? And let's be bold and courageous and think about that. One of the more exciting things for me as a reporter before Katrina was getting to write about New Orleans Charter Middle School. I've been reflecting on that a lot lately. I think the thing that was most exciting in the conversations that I was having with educators there and families there was the time that that school took to reflect on what was happening and restructure as needed based on the children that they were serving. And that time was there because of the way the school set itself up, so the educators had the time to reflect and the courage to say, if this isn't working, we're not going to be married to something that isn't working for most of our kids, or all of our kids really, and we're going to be willing to try something different. And I think that was what was really excellent about that school community, or what seemed hopeful about it. And I want us to figure out how to do that in more school communities, and I think that we are kind of falling into a little bit of a let's argue over whether or not this approach is relatively better than the other approach that used to be, or better than somebody else's approach, but not saying let's think about what we need and let's build what we need around that. And so I really hope for our next 10 years we get courageous about that. And be willing to say, I was wrong, I tried something for 10 years and that didn't work, or hey, there's something great about how this teacher is doing something and we want to figure out how to make that happen. And also lift up the spaces where I know there are educators doing that already. They're doing it probably quietly and behind closed doors because it's not supported, but who are really trying to do something different, and I think we need to figure out how to find those radical voices and listen to them and center them.